What's up, y'all? Welcome to Dorian's DIY audio. I'm Dorian, and DIY, obviously, do it yourself. So, you guys want to know how I built a budget sound quality stereo for $1,250 with a little change to spare? Well, if you do, stick around. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share so we can continue to move forward and enjoy this little journey together. Anyway. So let's really quickly start on what the vehicle is. As you've seen in the beginning, it's a 2023 Toyota Tacoma. Non-JBL, so my stereo's not amplified, and that was good. So I chose to stay with the factory Toyota stereo for a couple quick reasons. One is everything works great. There's nothing to have an issue with, right? The second reason is once I expand, there's really no reason for my factory stereo besides for me to be able to see what's playing and switch tracks and take phone calls and maybe even use the CarPlay, Apple CarPlay, Android CarPlay, whatever it is. I'm an Android guy, not an Apple guy. Apples are only good for eating. Anyway, so let's talk about what I needed and why I did what I did. So I didn't want at any point to be down for having no sound. I didn't want to rush anything. If you're going to build budget, you kind of need to be strategic in the way you operate. So first thing I did was I did have to get myself what is known as a T-harness. T-harness plugs in the back of the stereo, and I was able to extract the high-level speaker outputs out from there without having to deal or touch anything in my factory harness. So basically, the T-harness will loop around and plug into each other. You can cut one end off, and you can have one end for you to tap into, and then another end for you to plug into your factory harness to go out to your factory speakers, if that's the way you choose to go. I didn't choose to go that way. So I cut the factory harness in half, or not the factory harness, I cut the T-harness in half, and from there I use what is known as speed wire or 9 conductor wire. This wire has 9 individual strands of wire inside, okay? 2 wires for each speaker, so two for the front left, front right, left rear, rear right. That equals 8. The 9th wire is your remote wire, and that helps to turn on whatever equipment you have, wherever it be, whether it's under the seat in the back, under the driver's and passenger seat, or in your trunk, if that's what you have. Okay, so I use that wire to get onto the back. I also chose at this point for me to run my own speaker wire from what is going to be my amplifiers out to all of my speakers. Now, controversially, kind of, I chose to use a 12 gauge copper clad aluminum. Now, a lot of people instantly jump to it has to be oxygen free cable. Well, this is inside, and hindsight, we need to get past that because there's a further explanation on there, and that's what I used. Okay, that was cheap, and it's from a great brand called Garrett. So what I chose to do is, once I took the signal from the stereo and ran it to the back with the 9 conductor wire, I was able to go ahead and install my front 6x9 speakers that I picked up. The component set, component meaning there's a woofer and a tweeter. This is just a 2-way that I chose to use was the Infinity Kappa 90 CSX. Great, phenomenal. Been over 8 months since I installed all of this stuff, and those performed very well. In order to install those into, or install speakers into modern vehicles nowadays, you're going to need what is referred to as a speaker adapter. It's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles on most vehicles nowadays. Anyway, I picked up the 6x9 adapters for my vehicle, and that's from a brand called Red Wolf. Also, I picked up a pair of NVX silicone speaker baffles. Now, you may have seen these around. They serve two purposes. One purpose is to protect the rear of the woofer from being contaminated, or having rain run over the woofer. So they're good on that aspect. Cool. I have a newer vehicle that really kind of doesn't pertain to me, but down the road it will. For me, the reason I picked them up was what happens on the front side of that silicone speaker baffle. So here is your speaker, here is your door card. Okay, in between the face of your speaker and your door card, there's a gap. That gap might be this big, that gap might be that big. Okay, that silicone baffle has a protrusion that is to cover, hopefully big enough to cover the gap that happens between the face of your speaker and the inside of your door card, and that is to help radiate the sound into the cabin of the vehicle. Otherwise, what happens is you get some resonance going on and some leakage behind the door card, and then it leaks into the cabin. So it does make a pretty decent difference to use some sort of decoupler, some way to make sure that sound protrudes through the door. Okay, moving forward. So we have the woofers in, we have the baffles in, and obviously we needed the adapter to do that. Then up front, the Tacoma actually has speakers in the dashboard. In order for me to install the tweeters from that component, I did need to pick up a set of Red Wolf adapter plates, and for my vehicle they call them 2.5 inch to tweeter adapter plates. Now there'll be a picture somewhere. Once again, I'll show you what I did for my install, but we need those to be able to put those tweeters there, and I did angle them so that they aren't straight on the windshield. They kind of come back towards the cabin of the vehicle and point towards the driver, me in my ears. So once we had the 6x9s and the tweeters installed, in accordance with having that 9 conductor wire and the 12 gauge wire going to all the locations, I was able to tie that all together, and I was able to just have my stereo playing. Now, I could hear a slight better bass note. The tweeters sounded a nice, more crisp, and it worked real great. But it didn't really justify spending the amount of money that I spent to have just those newer speakers in. So what we did was we continued to move forward, and I did pick up some rear speakers for the back, which are 6.5. The first set of speakers I picked up was a set of Infinity Reference 6.5 components, and when I got those, they didn't quite, it wasn't what I was looking for. Not saying that they were bad, I'm sure they perform fairly decent, wasn't what I was looking for. So I chose to go with something a little different than most people would choose to go with nowadays, and that is, well, a lot of people choose to go with them, but sound quality guys look down their nose at them. And those are PA speakers, right? Pro audio. Now, very quickly, let me go off into my tangent. Every speaker is just a speaker, whether it's a tweeter, a horn, a pro audio, whatever. They all have a duty to fulfill. If you use that driver for a purpose, then it's going to perform for that purpose you chose to use it for. I don't believe that pro audio speakers are just trash and they have no purpose at all in sound quality. That's just nonsense. They don't cost a ton of money. All right. So a lot of people think that sound quality have to cost a lot of money. You know, first speakers you get are Focals or Morels. Cool. Not poo-pooing on you, but live a little first. Anyway, so I chose to use the Down for Sound Hexachrome Pros in the rear. And I didn't use those as a woofer. I chose to use those as a mid-range. Okay, so I had to buy another set of 6.5-inch adapters to be able to use 6.5 in the factory location. And I also chose to go ahead again and order those NVX silicone speaker baffles for the same reason that I chose in the front. Okay, so we have all of those wired in. And now with everything being wired up, I was able to connect everything together in the back underneath. All right, now I had audio to all of my speakers. I can continue to drive, and basically there was kind of no difference. A little difference. There was a little difference. The price that I spent, or the amount of money that I spent, it really wasn't worth it. Okay, but from there, I decided to continue moving forward. So I've for years always, all my vehicles had stereos in it, and for years I always used audio control. I know a lot of people think that a lot of these other brands are better and they do something different. They kind of really don't. We'll go through that in a different video when I go over the line output converters. So I chose to use the Audio Control LC7i, and I did not need the Pro version because I didn't need any of the load cell that comes in a Pro. So I chose to use the regular LC7i. Once I tapped into the LC7i, I was able to take the high level input from the stereo, so speaker level outputs, run those into the LOC, right, line output converter, and take that and drop it down to RCA levels. And once now we had ourselves RCAs out. Okay, and I happened to be surfing the web and I found this company. Another company is kind of controversial, but I don't really care about that. I've been around the audio game for a long time, and there's always some sort of drama. But anyway, I happened to run across this amplifier, which is known as, or from a company called Down for Sound. And they had a 5-channel amplifier that just happened to first caught my eye because it looked really good. Second off, the measurements on it was very decent and what I was looking for. That amplifier is the Down for Sound JP95T. Now, I'll put the specs up somewhere, and you'll see that they actually, the amplifier does very well. And it's a powerful amplifier for the price and for what it is. It is a Class D amplifier, and it's a 5-channel. So it works to cover everything that I need. So I installed that 5-channel amplifier on the speakers that I had, the Infinities up front and the Down for Sound Hexicone PA speakers in the rear. So in the front, really quickly, I chose to pretty much, those play full range. I'm not cutting any bass out of them or anything. I'm letting the crossover cut some of that bass out, but I'm pretty much giving that a full range up front. And I'll tell you what, there's times when I pull in a neighborhood and I turn the subwoofer down, and those 6x9s are impressive. I do have bass up front. So on the Hexicone Pros in the rear, the mid-ranges, what I chose to do on a high pass, I chose to set that crossover point, I believe roughly around 80 to maybe 100 hertz. So that allows that to play 80 or 100 hertz up. And then on a low pass, I believe I set that somewhere in a neighborhood of like 10,000 hertz down. So it's playing in a mid-range frequency. Now, I'm a guy who actually loves having rear fill. Without it, it's not for me. I'm sorry. I know some people love to have only the front and a subwoofer so that the sound stage is all the way on a windshield. I need rear fill. Now, do whatever pleases you. If you eventually get in competition, yeah, you kind of want to cut the rear fill and move forward. But here's the deal. $120 for those 2 rear speakers, and I can just fade forward or mute the 2 rear channels that go back there, and everything's up front anyway. So that mitigates that situation. Now, with me using mid-ranges in the back and tweeters in a dash, but woofers in a door, it actually kind of did something nice. This truck being as small as it is, you can see it's a 4-door Tacoma, right? It did add what mid-rangers add. It added all of the instruments, the horns, any of the brass, the sounds of the vocals. It bought all of that right out. It really did. I'm sorry for you guys who think that PA speakers are junk. It did. It helped. It brought it out really nicely. And it really made the sound a lot better. And if you fade those out, the components up front, they do really well, but it is missing something, and that's the mid-range region. Okay, so let's continue to move forward. So once we had all of that installed, I chose to then start to add that amplifier that I was talking about before, along with the line output converter. And man, that woke everything up once it was plugged in. Geez, that worked really good. Now, for me to power that stuff up, obviously you needed some sort of amp kit, okay? And I chose to use the bigger brother to what I have used many times in lots of different installs for lots of different vehicles. And that was a Stinger 0 gauge amp kit. Okay, now this amp kit only comes with your power wire, your A&L fuse holder, ground, and a remote wire. This isn't one that comes with RCA cables, so on and so forth. You have to add that yourself. So that is OFC, oxygen-free copper, right? I chose to use that primarily because the amplifier had 0 gauge inputs, but also because I knew later down the road I would be expanding. Even though if you watch some of my old vehicles, I was kind of leaning on I wasn't gonna, and that didn't happen. So now I have everything wired up, and I have the front stage going, I have the rear stage going, and I told you how I set the crossovers, and I was really happy with that. But I also needed some beat. I needed some bass, right? I did purchase a set of CT Sounds, the Hydro 10s, which are a shallow mount subwoofer. 2 of those things in a sealed box. They sounded pretty good, but I'm gonna tell you from someone who does adore sealed enclosures, if it's not a 15-inch sealed or better, typically it's just not for me. I'm sorry. I don't want to argue about it, but a sealed under a 15-inch, it might sound good here and there. It's just not for me. So I chose to run one of those in a dual 2 ohm configuration, which wired in parallel brings me down to dual 2 ohm configuration wired in parallel brings me down to 1 ohm, which allows me to get the maximum amount of
I'll rush more power, baby!
This 5-channel amplifier that I have. It is only 1 ohm stable, so I can't go any lower than 1 ohms. I am giving that subwoofer about double the wattage that it's supposed to have, and it's taking it. It's doing great. So I tried it in sealed configuration, and it worked good, right? So for my birthday, we went up to Newport, Rhode Island, and I built myself a half cubic foot box sealed, which CT Sounds recommends for that subwoofer, and it sounded pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, it did what it needed to do. You're not breaking no SPO records, but it sounded decent. But it quite wasn't what I was looking for. So I did go to building myself a custom enclosure. And even though CT Sounds recommend that you put this in a 1 cubic foot, I did go into 1ISD and I modeled it in a 1.25 cubic foot and it worked. Okay. Now, being in Tacoma, having a little bit of room, I did have to kind of shrink the port down just a little bit. And one thing that I know is when you shrink the port down a little bit, you will grow in bandwidth, but you will kind of lose a little bit of your lows, okay? And this really happened to work out what I did in the back here with that enclosure. And I will show you it. I did have to model it also. I didn't have to, but I chose to. Build this into a CAD program, which I do use a lot to figure things out, and it came out really good. So the speaker was like $100 and a sheet of plywood, or sorry, I didn't use plywood, I use MDF. I know everybody's birch. I'm old school. Okay, I do use birch, I do use plywoods, but I still prefer myself MDF. Anyway, pass forward with that. I did pick up a sheet of MDF 3/4 4x8, and that costs like $48. We'll just round it up to $50, and I had to come up with a build there. So enough of me talking. Let's just have a quick look around at some of the things in here. So I talked about using a factory head unit. There's a factory head unit, and I'm able to use all my factory controls on there. And I'm also to plug in and do Apple CarPlay and that stuff. Also, let's take a look down below, and we can say here is the down for sound bass knob, which is pretty cool. But right now I just kind of have it mashed in between the center console and the e-brake. And you know, this one's pretty decent. Volume as normal, and then this is a voltmeter and a temperature gauge, and you also have clip lights down here. Okay, you can see this yellow wire, and that was my mistake because I was a little too rough with the factory wire and I tore it up, but I do have a replacement. So let's go ahead and go onto the back and show you. Well, before we go to the back, we'll just take a look. There's really nothing you can see, but I will show you in videos. Here is the front door. It's just a front door. There's nothing to see. The woofer's in there, and it does good. Up here in the dash, these are where I have the tweeters and those tweeter adapter plates, and they do angle towards me, and they sound pretty good, but in phase 2, we will be moving on to something different. All right, so here we are in the rear, and we'll go ahead and pluck these rear seats up. It's coming, they just fold forward. All right, let's start on this end. So here you see, this is the 12 gauge, sorry, not 12 gauge, this is a 0 gauge wire OFC that comes from the front, comes in, and shrink wrap. There is ferrules on here. I do love using ferrules, and even here on the remote wire I use them. And then here's all 5 of the channels that actually have ferrules. Here is a tap that I needed to use to get power that goes over to the audio control LC7i. Now, in here, right there, coming up, that is that 9-core wire that has all of the speaker wires, and it goes into the audio control, or it goes into the LC7i and converts speaker levels onto the outputs of RCAs, and then those RCAs go into the amplifier. So that's pretty simple and straightforward there. Now let's go ahead and look at what I had to do in the rear for a subwoofer so I can get myself a little extra thumb. Okay, so here's a CT Sounds Hydro 10, and it's really not much of a subwoofer, but it does do very well. And I can guarantee you that at the price, or anyone who gets in this vehicle is not, and I don't care what level you are, you're not gonna poo-poo at the amount of output from this subwoofer in this enclosure. Okay, and then once you know that it's $100 subwoofer, I think you might be absolutely you might be kind of floored away with its performance. So there you go, there's the enclosure. Right, there's a lot of angles on here you can't quite see, but this isn't a flat box. I believe there's only 1 or 2 90-degree cuts on this whole box, and everything else is, well, 3 if you include that little one right there. The rest of it is all some sort of angle. Now, would I change anything different? Not really. Nope. This is a budget build, and this is only the first phase of it. Now, a lot of people will say you should have went and used a DSP. You're not wrong. Okay, I would, and I own a few different DSPs, and the one that I have for this vehicle for the first iteration is the Down for Sound EZ6D8. 6 inputs in, 8 outputs out, and it does have a Toslink input. Okay, that at the time was $280 roughly. That was $280 at the time, roughly, and sometimes you can catch it for about $240. You could drop using the LC7i, and you could just go straight to DSP. It's a difference of $150, and it is a very respectable upgrade. You can't shake your stick at that, and it is a pretty decent unit for the price. Actually, it's a pretty decent unit, just kind of across the board, right? Other than that, there's not really much of anything else different that I'm going to do. So let's go into future. This is a sound quality build, and as you can see right now, we kind of have a really great sound, and it sounds really good. There's rattles in the doors. There's two rattles that I can fix very simply, and one is inside the door handle itself has a two cables that go down to the mechanism, and you can hear those bzzz. So a little foam tape on those, that's gone. Okay, there is no sound deadening anywhere extra in this vehicle that I did yet. Okay, we will at some point in time. And then also in the back behind the subwoofers, when I removed the plastic trays that were back there, they're now opened up the cabin atmospheric vents, and you can hear those bzz, 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 buzzing around a little bit. Let me show you those real quickly. So these are those back here. There's one on either side. Hopefully you can see them. It goes from like here to here. And there's another one on the back side behind that port over there. And I do need to do something to mitigate that situation. And once I do that, that will take away about 85 to 90% of the buzzing that I'm getting going on. Budget build down the road. We're going to continue to adapt onto this. So anyway, that's what I did to get myself a pretty decent sound quality stereo inside this truck for the price of $1,250. And there is definitely a lot of room for expansion, but I'll tell you right now, this thing sounds phenomenal. In retrospect, for a budget of $1,250, it sounds phenomenal. All right, and we will make it better. So please make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and keep your eye on what's going on, and we'll move forward from there. Until then, y'all, peace out, and